ready to plunge into the depths of the unknown, where reality intertwines with the darkest of nightmares. Welcome to Black Horror Stories, where we delve into the chilling narrative of demonic entities and the relentless struggle for one woman's very essence. As the sinister plot unfolds, questions arise. Who is behind these heinous acts, and will the victim emerge unscathed? Brace yourself for a tale of terror and suspense, and stay tuned until the end to uncover the truth behind the demonic possession. This is the story of Diana, who lived in a beautiful house with her husband James. Everything was going smoothly. Both had good jobs that earned them a decent income. However, Diana often experienced disturbing nightmares that varied, but always had the same outcome. It was a recurring theme of people relentlessly chasing her. Sometimes a group without weapons, and other times armed individuals with the clear intent to kill her. Night after night, Diana would wake up drenched in sweat, prompting her to confide in her husband James. James listened attentively and tried to reassure her, insisting that they were only dreams and there was no need to worry. Somewhat comforted by her husband's soothing words, Diana decided to try not to dwell on the frightening dreams and continue with her life. Yet, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, unable to pinpoint the exact issue. At work, she struggled with intense drowsiness, finding it challenging to concentrate or perform her duties properly. This was not the case before, and it deeply concerned her, as she always went to bed early at home and felt well rested. Upon returning home, she shared her work-related fatigue with James, explaining that she could barely function and constantly felt the urge to sleep. James, looking alarmed, admitted that he had been experiencing similar fatigue at work for some time. "Let's not dwell on it. Let's go to bed earlier this week," suggested James. Diana was accustomed to her husband's logical explanations for everything. That same night, Diana experienced another set of intense nightmares involving an attack. This time, enormous aggressive dogs chased her, attempting to devour her. Thankfully, she managed to escape, but woke up bathed in sweat. She was so frightened that her entire body trembled, as if her heart wanted to leap out of her chest from fear. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and she felt as if she had truly fled from the dogs that sought to attack her. Diana couldn't fall back asleep. Eventually, she got up and headed towards the bathroom to relieve herself. In the hallway leading to the toilet, she suddenly felt goosebumps all over her body. Naturally, she was startled, as this had been happening more frequently when she walked through the hallway during the nighttime hours. This time, it wasn't just goosebumps. She also saw a shadow at the end of the hallway from the corner of her eye. She couldn't discern if it had a female or male form, as the shadow only stood there for a few seconds before suddenly disappearing. The next morning, she couldn't keep the incident to herself and told James what had happened. He listened patiently, but was momentarily speechless. "It's not that I don't believe you, dear, but I've never seen or experienced such things myself. It's strange to me that these things are happening to you," he said, pondering the situation. Diana didn't blame James either, as if he had never experienced such a thing himself. She couldn't expect him to handle it well. She did notice the concern on his face, because he had always been a protective husband. But in this case, he couldn't shield her from something he had never seen himself. She could see that he was deep in thought, and what she had shared with him weighed on his mind. Dear Black horror stories. Family, unfortunately, it didn't stop at just one occurrence. Diana began to see a shadow more frequently in the evening. The shadow became increasingly distinct, and at times, the eyes seemed to glow with a fiery red hue. The fear coursing through her body was indescribable. It became so severe that at one point, she decided not to go to the bathroom at night, leading to a severe bladder infection. This was because the mysterious shadow didn't appear every night. There were no fixed times for its manifestation. Sometimes it took weeks or even months before she saw it again. Essentially, she never knew when it would reappear in the house. Over time, Diana started feeling less comfortable in her own home. She perpetually felt tired, as if something invisible was draining her energy. Moreover, she experienced seeing shadows flash by whenever James was at work. Fleetingly, she glimpsed various dark figures in the rooms of her home. When she checked the rooms, there was no one there. But shortly after, she would once again see various figures darting past. It was as if they were deliberately trying to scare her. However, nothing happened when James was at home. As soon as James stepped through the door, it seemed as if nothing unusual had occurred. Everything was normal until the moment she once again saw a shadow in the middle of the night. One day, Diana arrived at her workplace. The moment she opened the door to her office, she smelled a very unpleasant odor that immediately made her nauseous. It was a smell of something decaying, as if a creature had died. She couldn't pinpoint exactly where the smell was coming from, even after checking everywhere. Turning on the air conditioning didn't help at all. The smell lingered in the room. If anything, the odor seemed to get worse, so she called a service team to inspect the air conditioning, hoping they could explain the origin of the foul smell. However, there was nothing wrong with the air conditioning. No blockages that could cause such an unpleasant odor. She then noticed a significant amount of dust on her chair and desk. After wiping her desk with a cloth, she found a copper coin under her mouse pad. This was particularly strange because there was a cleaner who had thoroughly cleaned Diana's office the night before. This was Diana's private office, and nobody had the key to her door. She was baffled and literally stood there with her hands in her hair, looking at the mess in her office. After cleaning up everything, Diana decided to get back to work, but she soon felt tired, nauseous, and couldn't concentrate, prompting her to report sick and go home. Upon arriving home, Diana felt even worse. She felt bloated, as if she were about to vomit. Her body felt hot, and she realized she had a severe fever. She could barely stand on her legs, so with her last strength, she went straight to her bedroom, threw her bag on the bed, and lay down. She closed her eyes to take a moment to rest because she felt her heart racing. However, she heard a voice in her head saying, "Open your eyes." She did, and suddenly, she saw someone unknown standing at the foot of her bed. Startled, she tried to sit up in bed in a panic. To her horror, she found that she couldn't move at all. It was as if she were frozen. With her eyes wide open in fear, she looked towards the person at the bed, but she couldn't do anything. She wanted to scream for help, but her body didn't respond. She distinctly felt as if hands were around her neck and a heavy weight pressing her into the bed. the person or shadow at the foot of her bed stood at a distance, emotionless, watching her. Thick tears rolled down her eyes, so many tears that her vision became blurred. She tried to blink and focus to see the person better. However, at a certain moment, she regained control over her body, and the shadow suddenly disappeared. She ran through the house to check if anyone was inside, and if everything was still locked. Fortunately, this was the case, but in reality, she knew this already. What she had seen was clearly not human. Humans can't simply disappear before your eyes. She remained shocked in the living room because it was the first time something supernatural had physically attacked her. In the evening, James, who had finished work that day, would return home. But she was so scared in the house that she called him to come home a bit earlier. He did so after coordinating with his employer, and an hour later, he was home. Diana fell into his arms, crying, and told him what had happened. She also mentioned feeling very strange and weak. "It feels like there's something in me. I don't know if it's just an idea, but that's how it feels," she said worriedly to James. Diana told him that she was genuinely concerned about how her day had unfolded because she also felt uneasy at work. She expressed a strong feeling that something was seriously wrong, but she just didn't know what exactly it was. Meanwhile, she continued to feel sicker, becoming hotter, experiencing headaches, and being drenched in sweat. "Call my mother," she asked her husband. James called Lisbeth, his mother-in-law, and explained the situation. Lisbeth said she would get ready and come their way. Eventually, Lisbeth arrived not too long after with Frank, Diana's father, to assess the situation. By the time the parents arrived, Diana was in so much pain that she could barely speak. All she could do was groan in pain. The parents now wanted to hear everything in the finest details, and James recounted everything his wife had told him. Lisbeth said, "I think I know what this is about. This is something that has been going on for a long time." She looked at Frank, and he nodded in agreement, saying, "We need to find a solution, and we can't wait. We need to seek help today, because look at how sick our daughter is." Of course, Diana and James didn't know what her parents were talking about, but they were relieved that they were willing to help find assistance. Diana seemed to be getting heavier and heavier, mentioning that it felt like her head was about to explode. Suddenly, Diana's demeanor changed, and she stood up. She started speaking in a strange language, and it was clear that she was no longer herself. Diana was in a trance, and an entity spoke through her, making it known that it was present. The family now knew for sure that something was really wrong. This entity confirmed that something was severely amiss. Diana looked so peculiar with her eyes that it immediately instilled fear. Lisbeth tried to pray with the others for Diana, but it seemed ineffective, and the entity inside her seemed to become more agitated. There appeared to be no solution through prayer. Kenneth suggested seeking help from Mr. Steve, a spiritual healer he knew. They couldn't reach him by phone because they didn't have his number, so they decided to drive to him and bring Diana. It was a daunting task to get her into the car, despite her slim and small stature. Diana thrashed around, kicking and hitting like a possessed person. And because she was possessed by something or multiple entities, she felt much heavier than usual. It seemed as if she weighed at least 3 times her normal weight because they couldn't lift her together. In the car, James had to constantly struggle to restrain Diana because she tried to attack him. She glared at him furiously, and her eyes looked eerie. They rolled back almost entirely, showing nearly white. Meanwhile, she made strange growling sounds, as if something purely demonic was within her. It sounded genuinely inhuman, and hearing these noises sent shivers down their spines. Therefore, Frank did his utmost to drive there as quickly as possible. Once they arrived at Mr. Steve's residence, fortunately, he was present. The concerned expressions on their faces indicated that this was a serious matter. Kenneth, her brother, who had arrived with his own transportation, took the lead as he knew Steve for a while. He briefly explained what was going on, and Steve invited the family inside. He immediately began preparing for his spiritual work, crushing garlic along with other ingredients and smearing it all over Diana's body. In response, she began to scream and yell in anger, kicking and hitting. It didn't seem like Mr. Steve's method was helping, no matter what he did. Diana continued to behave aggressively, still in a trance and never calm. After trying everything with no apparent success, Steve decided to delve deeper into why this work seemed to be progressing so laboriously. The demons that had possessed Diana made it known that they were sent for Diana. Steve didn't want to give up, especially not with the family returning home while Diana remained in this state. Steve called 3 other gentlemen with whom he regularly collaborates spiritually to come and support in this case. Immediately upon arrival, they initiated the necessary rituals, but it seemed like it was not going to be an easy task. This was because the devilish voodoo priest was simultaneously engaged in his voodoo practices. He knew that someone was attempting to break the devilish powers of his work. Therefore, the devilish voodoo priest had immediately taken action to strengthen the devilish forces. Steve and his 3 colleagues were working from one side to free Diana, while the devilish voodoo priest was actively reinforcing all the negativity from the other side. It was like trying to mop up with an open tap, as just when Mr. Steve and his team seemed to make some progress, and Diana momentarily appeared to return to herself, the devilish voodoo priest intensified his efforts on her. Steve became somewhat desperate because he had never encountered such a challenging task before. He informed Diana's family that the devilish voodoo priest was working with 5 demons. During the spiritual work, he had also seen that this devilish voodoo priest was a large-built man. Steve described the devilish voodoo priest's appearance in great detail, but no one seemed to know this man. One of the demons with which the devilish voodoo priest worked manifested in the form of a tiger. This was the same demon that spoke through Diana in an incomprehensible language. Even Steve and his helpers couldn't understand the language, and they couldn't figure out what the tiger was saying. Steve mentioned that this task was too heavy for him, and that he apparently couldn't handle it. "I'm sorry. I really did my best, but I must be honest about the fact that the magnitude of this task is truly beyond my capabilities. The devilish voodoo priest keeps strengthening the demonic powers, and we're not making progress this way. He has made it clear to us on a spiritual level that he is aware we're trying to disrupt his work. If I remove the demons, he immediately sends others, so it seems like we're not getting anywhere. I don't want to do half-hearted work and give the impression that I'm helping you. Do you perhaps have someone else who could handle this for you?" Steve said, disappointingly. The family didn't blame Steve and appreciated his honesty. Meanwhile, Olivia, the girlfriend of Diana's brother, also complained of feeling unwell as they walked to the car to drive home. Even before they could leave Mr. Steve's house, Olivia suddenly went into a trance. Everyone was at a loss because now 2 women from this family were in a trance. What now? How would they solve this? Once they arrived home, Lisbeth sought help, and after hours of searching, got a number from a friend who could assist. This was my number, and I am the narrator of this particular story. Lisbeth called the number and got through to me. Before continuing with the story, I would like to ask you to leave a like so that our channel can continue to grow. We are almost at 2,000 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe. I still remembered that she called me in the afternoon. She sounded nervous, and I heard her voice trembling. Hastily, she told her story in a torrent of words. She let me know that this was an urgent situation and that she wanted help as soon as possible for both ladies. She wanted to come over immediately and asked if that was possible. It was possible, and I gave her my address so she could come directly. In between, Lisbeth called me a few times because Diana was acting up quite a bit in the car, so she wanted to know what they could do in this situation. I told her, "Those demons know exactly that you're coming here for help, and they always act up. So all you can do now is do your best to restrain her as well as possible until you get here. Then we'll take over, so just hold on." My father and I were already waiting for them. During the time we waited for them, we spent our time preparing for the work. When we saw the cars entering our property, we prayed to the Almighty God and our spiritual guides, protectors, for the necessary strength and guidance. As we did this, I immediately saw the station wagon shaking violently, as if a large bear were thrashing about inside. The family hurried out of their vehicles with fearful faces and walked toward us. Quick introductions were made, and we focused on the problem that clearly needed our attention. The screams and roars from Diana made my ears buzz. She was really going berserk. My father and I walked towards the car where Diana was. James and Frank walked with us, trying with all their might to get her out of the car. They couldn't do it because she had become heavy. This was obviously the work of those demons. They knew that help had arrived, and they didn't want that. The 2 men couldn't get Diana out, so I said to them, "Leave her, as it's not working to get her out of the car this way. Give us some space to resolve this." The men stepped aside, and my father, who was right behind me, signaled that I could communicate with the entities to find out what was going on. I opened the car door, and suddenly, Diana emerged. I didn't even have to force her out of the car. She did it on her own, and she looked particularly eerie and strange. With a hunched back, like a severely deformed old woman, she crawled out of the car. It was the tiger manifesting itself in Diana. I immediately sensed the energy of it. The movements, the thing, indicated to me that it was a feline. I then blew very hard a liquid substance toward this monstrosity that manifested as a tiger. Because this blowing wasn't just blowing, it was spiritually charged. Diana fell backward, as if someone had hit her very hard. The demon inside her couldn't handle it, so it screamed, as if it were on fire. I grabbed Diana by the neck, ready to blow there too, and asked the demon, "Start telling me now why you came into this lady's path? What is your intention? Why are you in her body?" I ordered the demon to tell everything, and he refused to talk. He also wouldn't say who sent him. All he asked was to let him go, so he could go to his master boss. I then commanded him to leave Diana's body immediately, or I would make him burn even more. The demon didn't want this, so I gave him the chance to leave Diana's body so that he could return to the one who sent him. But this didn't solve the problem, because there were more demons in Diana. Almost immediately after this demon left, another demon came forward, behaving differently than the previous one. This one was clearly more masculine. That's the impression it gave me. And he absolutely refused to look me in the eyes. He saw too much light in me, the light of my spiritual protectors around me, and he couldn't stand it. He was inclined towards darkness, so I only inspired fear in him. Eventually, he only addressed me with closed eyes, facing the ground. He spoke to me in a human language, which was easily understandable. Unlike the previous demon who spoke in a different unknown language, making it incomprehensible to ordinary people. I wouldn't have understood it either without the help of my spiritual protectors. This demon admitted that everything he had done was done on the orders of his master. In Diana's case, he was sent to destroy her life. Everything in her life had to go straight to the abyss. No success, conflicts with everyone, financial chaos, and eventually she had to become depressed, leading her to end her life. This task was detailed by this demon's boss, who later turned out to be a colleague of Diana. It turned out that Diana held a high position in the company where she worked. When she joined, she was immediately offered this position due to her education, creating jealousy among a colleague who had long been eyeing the position. Ivan, the jealous colleague, couldn't accept that he missed out on the job, so he turned to dark forces to eliminate Diana. The demon revealed all this in the finest details. He didn't want to be sent back to Ivan because he knew he would be cruelly punished for not completing his task. The demon told us that he had done so many evil deeds for Ivan that for this reason, he no longer had a pure soul. He begged us not to send him back to Ivan because he believed he would be tortured, and he didn't want that anymore. Therefore, he just wanted to finish Ivan's assignment so that he wouldn't receive any punishment from Ivan. My father and I said that he would not get the chance to further harm Diana. Still, we would help him break free from the spiritual ties that Ivan had bound him with, turning him into a slave who had to do all the dirty work for his master. Honestly, I'm not sure if I should call this entity a demon. It was the spirit of a deceased person, summoned by Ivan to carry out malicious actions. This spirit, compelled through various demonic rituals, was obligated to do only evil. Eventually, we liberated the entity from the ties, binding him to his master, Ivan. We guided him towards the light, relieving him of the fear of Ivan and his dark intentions. I must admit that this entity cooperated fairly well, making our work much easier. Before freeing him, we made it clear that he should deliver a message to Ivan, notifying him that we were aware of his actions and patiently awaiting his arrival. We assured Ivan that we were not afraid of him, since his methods posed no threat to us. Shortly after conveying the message, a sudden shock ran through Diana's body. She rose furiously, as if electrified, casting a hostile glare at us, indicating that she was once again under the influence of something else. It was almost certainly Even, who had now taken spiritual possession of her. This suspicion was confirmed as he began speaking through Diana. With crossed arms and wide-open eyes, he addressed us angrily in an unintelligible language, seemingly hurling insults at us. My father took over, informing Ivan that we were not impressed by his demonic tactics. If he believed we were afraid, he should attempt to use his powers on us. After enduring many threats from Ivan, my father performed several rituals to sever the ties between Ivan and Diana. This succeeded, and we witnessed the diabolical grip he had on Diana slowly fading away. Diana gradually regained consciousness, but was completely exhausted. She lay on the ground like a limp doll, and we had to assist her in sitting up. Diana's family wanted us to send all the demons of Ivan back to him. We understood their anger, but we explained that returning such negativity was not our approach. Individuals like Even receive their karma, and nature will likely settle the score with them. Despite their rage, they agreed to respect our advice and leave everything to the Lord Jesus Christ above. James embraced his wife, who immediately burst into tears, feeling both confused and liberated. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. We, together with the family, explained everything that had happened and who was responsible for it. Naturally, she was shocked, as she had never thought Ivan could be such a malicious person. At work, he always appeared helpful and kind to her. We reassured Diana, assuring her that she need not fear Ivan anymore, as he could no longer harm her, even if he wanted to. Through rituals, we had already protected Diana against any remaining malevolent intentions Ivan might have. However, Diana still had to visit us for 3 consecutive days for spiritual purification. The family and Diana agreed, wasting no time. The next day, she arrived with James and her parents to take the necessary follow-up steps. Diana was noticeably happier, healthier, and radiant, a completely transformed person. She also appeared much fairer than before. On the first day when she sought help, she seemed almost dark in color, but now she looked fresh and healthy. She no longer resembled someone on the verge of death. In our discussions with Diana, we discovered that the substance she found in her office was not ordinary dust, but finely ground bones processed into a powder with black magic. If Diana, and only Diana, touched it, she would connect with various demons. Unfortunately, precisely what had happened. This served as a true eye-opener for Diana, leading her to decide not to accept food from just anyone, as the intentions behind such offerings are often unknown. Diana had unknowingly consumed coffee and food from Ivan multiple times, which he had enchanted to strengthen his control over her. She always accepted these offerings gratefully, completely unaware that he intended to eliminate her. She had always regarded him as a kind and helpful colleague. Dear Black Horror family, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Let this be a lesson. Not everything that glitters is truly gold.